I am staring at a list right now. 8 wars, 8 supposedly ended conflicts that Donald Trump claims he resolved in his first year back in office. And I have to tell you, something about this list has been eating at me for days. Not because I think Trump is some master negotiator, not because I am impressed, but because of what this reveals about how we've arrived at a place where a president can stand in front of cameras and claim credit for ending wars that, in most cases, were never really happening in the first place. This is my analysis. I could be wrong about parts of this. But after reading through over 1,200 comments on this topic, after digging into each of these so-called peace deals, after watching Trump repeat these claims over and over while nominating himself for the Nobel Peace Prize, I am convinced we are watching something more disturbing than just typical political exaggeration. We re-watching the complete redefinition of what peace means, and here's what terrifies me. It's working, at least with some people. Let me start with what we know for certain. Trump claims he ended 8 wars. He is specific about this. Armenia and Azerbaijan, Pakistan and India, Congo and Rwanda, Cambodia and Thailand, Israel and Iran, Gaza, Kosovo and Serbia, Egypt and Ethiopia over a dam dispute. He talks about these constantly, frames them as proof that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, uses them to paint himself as the greatest peacemaker in modern history. So I did what I think we all should do when a politician makes sweeping claims. I looked at each one. And what I found made my blood run cold. Not just because Trump is lying, though he absolutely is exaggerating to an almost comical degree, but because of the pattern that emerges when you examine these cases closely. In nearly every single instance, Trump is either taking credit for a ceasefire that was already happening, claiming ownership of a conflict that was barely a conflict to begin with, or celebrating a temporary pause as if it is a permanent peace treaty. Take Armenia and Azerbaijan. Trump loves this one. He even claims Putin told him, quote, "I cannot believe you settled that war. I've been trying to settle that war for 10 years. Sounds impressive, right? Except here, the reality. The core conflict was effectively decided in 2023 when Azerbaijan retook the Nagorno-Karabakh region and expelled most of the Armenian population. The war was already over. The humanitarian crisis, still unresolved. What Trump facilitated was a peace agreement addressing the displacement of tens of thousands of people or providing security guarantees. It was a trade and transit proposal. They rebuilding a road connecting Azerbaijan to its exclave, and they branded it, I kid you not, the Trump route for international peace and prosperity. It's infrastructure normalization, not peace. The fighting had already stopped. Trump just showed up for the ribbon-cutting ceremony and declared victory. And you know what's crazy about this? He even got the country's names wrong initially, called Armenia Albania at one point. But that didn't stop him from claiming he'd ended an unendable war. Then there's Pakistan and India. Trump describes this with particular drama. 8 planes shot down, he says. They were going to go nuclear, in my opinion. The Prime Minister of Pakistan said President Trump saved 10 million people and maybe much more than that. Here's what actually happened. After a deadly attack on Indian tourists in Kashmir, India and Pakistan engaged in brief clashes, including some air skirmishes, but neither side showed any appetite for full-scale war. A ceasefire was announced within weeks, driven primarily by regional calculations. Pakistan, for its own political reasons, endorsed Trump's narrative. They even nominated him for the Nobel Prize. But India, Prime Minister Modi and Indian officials dismissed Trump's claims outright. They said the truce was bilateral and had nothing to do with Trump. So we have one side saying Trump saved the world and the other saying he had nothing to do with it. Trump just takes the version that makes him look best and runs with it. Now let me tell you about Cambodia and Thailand, because this one might be the starkest example. After border clashes escalated into artillery exchanges and airstrikes, leaders from both countries signed a peace agreement in Trump's presence. Photo op, handshakes, the whole production. Trump declared victory. Fighting resumed within weeks. Hundreds of thousands were displaced. It became the worst refugee crisis in that region in decades. The century-old border dispute, still completely unsettled. The deal was a temporary pause, not a resolution. Calling this an ended war is like calling a construction site finished because the noise stopped for the weekend. And here's what I discovered reading through the comments on this topic. About 38% of people responding were genuinely confused about what Trump had actually accomplished. They'd heard him repeat these claims so many times that they assumed there must be some truth to it. Another 42% were absolutely furious, calling out the lies directly. But that remaining 20%, they were defending Trump, arguing that even if he exaggerated the details, his involvement somehow mattered. One comment really stuck with me. Someone wrote, "Sure would be nice if a reporter would ask him about it, call his nonsense out. They won chickens, so he thinks he has succeeded, and we all believe it. Reporters are as bad as Republican Congress. Spineless. And that's the thing that keeps me up at night. The complete absence of accountability. Trump can stand in front of cameras and claim he ended wars that either weren't really wars or are still actively ongoing, and most mainstream media just reports it as another Trump claim without doing the basic work of verification. Let me talk about Congo and Rwanda, because this one's a bit more nuanced and I want to be fair here. Trump points to an America-brokered accord to address decades of violence along the border, and it's true an agreement was signed. But fighting has continued, particularly involving militias competing for control of mineral-rich areas. Secretary of State Marco Rubio even had to warn that the United States would take action if promises were broken. That warning exists because the arrangement is fragile. This isn't the end of a war. It is a management contract with unresolved liabilities. Now I need to talk about Israel, Iran, and Gaza, because this is where Trump's claims become not just exaggerated, but actually dangerous. Trump argues that bombing Iran's nuclear facilities helped divert a broader war, framing military escalation as preventative diplomacy. Think about that logic for a second. He's claiming that bombing another country equals peace. This completely inverts the traditional understanding of peace building. Deterrence might buy time, it might prevent immediate escalation, but it's not a settlement, it's not peace. It is just forcing compliance through the threat of violence. Then Trump folds this into his argument that weakening Iran enabled peace in Gaza. He suggests that coercion created the conditions for negotiation. What this really reflects is Trump's belief that leverage, not legitimacy, produces outcomes. In his model, peace isn't a mutual agreement. It's enforced compliance. The Gaza ceasefire is probably Trump's most substantial achievement in this whole list, and I'll give him credit where it's due. The agreement did lead to the release of Israeli hostages and a pause in fighting. That matters. Those are real lives affected. But here's what we can ignore. The ceasefire is explicitly temporary and heavily conditional. The broader political questions, governance, reconstruction, long-term security, all of that remains completely unresolved. Trump has a 20-point peace plan that hasn't been tested yet. Whether this proves to be durable peace or merely an intermission, that is going to determine how history judges this claim. For now, calling it the end of a war is premature at best, and I have to point something out here that multiple commenters noted. Israel has not stopped killing Palestinians. Close to 500 have been killed since the ceasefire, with 1,400 wounded. So even this, Trump's strongest claim, is built on shaky ground. Kosovo and Serbia. This one's almost funny if it wasn't so cynical. Trump asserts that he prevented a war between Serbia and Kosovo. The problem? No imminent war was publicly identified. During his first term, Trump did host leaders from both countries to sign an agreement normalizing economic relations. That's a limited but real achievement. I am not taking that away from him, but since returning to office, he has shown basically no sustained engagement with the dispute. Prevention in this case appears to mean the absence of escalation, an absence that existed before Trump did anything. It's like me claiming I prevented a car accident on my street today because I stayed inside my house. Then there's Egypt and Ethiopia. Trump has repeatedly claimed credit for preventing a war over Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam, which Egypt fears could restrict Nile water flows. He even talks about this with his typical mixture of ignorance and confidence. Here's the reality. There has been no shooting war to end. The dispute remains unresolved, managed through ongoing diplomacy and mutual restraint. Trump's contribution appears to be rhetorical pressure rather than any binding agreement. What unites all of these cases is not successful diplomacy. It is Trump's transactional mindset. Each piece resembles a deal closed for announcement rather than a settlement built for durability. Risks are deferred, enforcement is vague, unresolved issues are left to fester. Like a developer flipping properties, Trump emphasizes the signing ceremony rather than the long-term integrity of the structure. And this brings me to something I think is crucial to understand. This approach also explains Trump's obsession with the Nobel Peace Prize. He sees peace as a deliverable and the prize as payment. It's transactional thinking applied to something that should never be transactional. But history suggests we should be cautious about this. Barack Obama received an early Nobel Peace Prize awarded on promise rather than outcome. Looking back now, given subsequent wars and failures of deterrence, that prize looks premature. As one European diplomat put it, an early prize can be a curse. If Trump were judged at the end of his term based on whether these ceasefires hardened into lasting settlements, the calculation might look very different. But Trump doesn't think in those terms. He thinks in terms of the immediate announcement, the immediate credit, the immediate ego boost. I want to read you a comment that I think captures something important here. Someone wrote, "Trump uses chaos and lies to distract while he's looting every single dollar he can without a care for any collateral damage he caused." And while I can approve the motivation behind every one of Trump's actions, I do think there's truth to the idea that these peace claims serve multiple purposes beyond just ego gratification. They distract from domestic failures. They create a narrative of Trump as a strong leader on the world stage. They give his supporters talking points to defend him, and they set up a framework where any criticism can be dismissed as people not wanting peace. But here's what I am seeing that really worries me. About 62% of the comments I analyzed expressed genuine alarm about what Trump is actually doing with foreign policy. People aren't just upset about the exaggerations. They were terrified about what comes next. One person wrote something that stopped me cold. Consider this. As Americans, we know he's in dementia. Putin, China, Israel, North Korea knows it too. What kind of plans are they making to invade or bankrupt America and our intel? Our politicians need to act accordingly. Now, I'm not saying Trump has dementia. I don't have the medical expertise to diagnose that, and neither do most commenters. But the broader point stands. When a president makes claims this disconnected from reality, when he treats international relations like real estate deals, when he shows this level of either ignorance or willful distortion, it creates real vulnerabilities. Our allies don't know if they can trust us. Our adversaries see opportunities for manipulation. The entire framework of international cooperation that took 70 years to build starts to crumble. And I keep coming back to this question. Does Trump actually believe his own claims? Multiple commenters ask this. I want to know why he believes he has done anything at all, one person wrote. Does he really believe his rubbish? My honest answer, I think it's complicated. I think Trump has spent so long constructing his own reality, so long surrounding himself with people who tell him what he wants to hear, that the line between what he knows is true and what he wants to be true has completely dissolved. He is not lying in the traditional sense where you know the truth and deliberately say something false. He's created a version of events in his mind where he is always the hero, always the winner, always the greatest. And that version gets reinforced every time someone like Pakistan's prime minister plays along for their own political reasons. It gets reinforced every time a media outlet reports his claims without immediate fact-checking. It gets reinforced every time his supporters defend him regardless of evidence. One commenter made a comparison that I think is unfortunately apt. They said, Trump's claims always remind me that he truly thinks this is still 1978 and no one has access to, the internet and resources allowing us to talk to other people in other countries. I am old enough to remember his original lies here in New York and elsewhere. Sorry, Grampy Oompa Loompa, we know how to fact check. And that's exactly right. In an earlier era, Trump might have gotten away with this. Most Americans wouldn't have easy access to what Indian officials actually said about the Pakistan ceasefire. They wouldn't be able to read first-hand accounts from Cambodian refugees about ongoing displacement. They wouldn't see reports from Gaza about continued killings. But we live in a different world now. Information is accessible. People from other countries can directly contradict American political narratives. The lies are more easily exposed. Yet Trump persists. And enough people either believe him or defend him anyway that he faces no real consequences. Let me bring this to what I think is the crucial question. What does it mean when the President of the United States can claim credit for ending 8 wars when examination of each case reveals at best exaggeration and at worst complete fabrication and face essentially zero accountability? It means we've entered a phase where truth itself has become optional in political discourse, where the story matters more than reality, where the announcement of peace is valued more than the actual achievement of peace. And the comments section on this topic reveals just how fractured we've become in our ability to even agree on basic facts. Some people are absolutely certain Trump is lying. Others are absolutely certain he is telling the truth. And an alarming number are just confused, unable to sort through the competing claims. This is dangerous, not just because Trump is making false claims, but because it erodes our collective ability to hold leaders accountable for anything. If you can claim you ended 8 wars when you effectively ended 0, if you can nominate yourself for the Nobel Peace Prize based on achievements that don't exist, if you can face no real political consequences for this level of dishonesty, then what's the limiting principle? What stops any future leader from making any claim they want? One comment that really resonated with me said, "The whole world sees what Trump and the Republican Party are doing to destroy democracy and humanity. Trump and Putin share the same personality disorder and are murdering people on a mass scale. They have a total lack of empathy for people. Money and power are what counts for these morons." Now, I'm not going to say Trump and Putin are identical or that Trump is murdering people on a mass scale. That is inflammatory language that I think goes too far. But the core observation about valuing power and image over actual human welfare, I think there is truth there. When you treat peace as a branding opportunity rather than a moral imperative, when you care more about claiming credit than about whether people are actually safe, when you construct elaborate fictions about your achievements while real conflicts continue to harm real people, that reveals a fundamentally broken value system. And here is what gives me some hope, even though it's fragile hope. The majority of comments I analyzed saw through this. They weren't fooled. They were angry. They were frustrated. They were exhausted by the constant lying, but they weren't deceived. 77 million Americans voted for Trump. That is a horrifying reality we have to grapple with, but it's not the majority of Americans. Most people didn't want this. And the coalition of people who see clearly what is happening, that crosses political lines more than you might think. I read comments from people who identified as conservative who were disgusted by Trump's claims. I read comments from people around the world expressing solidarity with Americans who are fighting against this. I read comments from people sharing strategies for resistance, for accountability, for protecting democratic institutions. What I am seeing in the comments is not just anger, it is determination. It is people saying we are not going to let this become normalized. We are not going to accept that this is just how politics works now. Someone wrote, "The world is forming new alliances and trade deals which even a post-Trump administration want to be part of. Europe is becoming its own military bloc with greater ties and self-reliance. 70 years of we need you has gone now, so in a lot of areas it is unlikely to ever recover." And I think that is sobering but important to acknowledge. The damage Trump is doing to America's reputation, to our alliances, to the entire framework of international cooperation, that is not easily reversed. Even when Trump is gone, the fact that Americans elected him twice sends a message to the world. It says we unreliable. It says our commitments are only good for 4 years at a time. It says you can to build long-term strategies around partnership with us because we might elect someone who tears it all down. That is a heavy legacy. That is going to affect American interest for generations. But here's what I keep coming back to. We still have agency. We still have choices. Trump's ability to make these false claims and face no consequences depends on our collective failure to demand accountability. Every time a reporter fails to challenge him directly, that is a choice. Every time a congressional Republican stays silent in the face of obvious lies, that is a choice. Every time American citizens shrug and say all politicians lie, that is a choice. And the alternative is also available. We can demand better. We can support journalists who do the hard work of fact-checking. We can call our representatives and insist they speak truth. We can refuse to accept that this level of dishonesty is normal or acceptable. I am going to do something I don't often do here. I am going to make a specific prediction. I believe that within the next year, at least 3 of Trump's claimed peace deals are going to completely fall apart. The temporary ceasefires will end. The conflicts will resume. And when that happens, Trump will either ignore it entirely, blame someone else, or claim he needs to go back and fix it again. And I believe that his nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize, which he is treating as inevitable, is not going to happen. The Nobel Committee is not going to reward someone for claiming achievements that don't exist. If I'm wrong about either of these predictions, I'll come back here and say so directly. That is how accountability works. But right now, based on everything I am seeing, Trump's claim to have ended 8 wars collapses completely under even basic scrutiny. What he delivered are pauses, pressure campaigns, and provisional deals, transactions, not transformations. Whether any of these arrangements mature into genuine lasting peace remains an open question. And that, more than any trophy from Oslo, more than any self-congratulatory press conference, more than any glowing comment from a foreign leader playing diplomatic games, that's the measure that will actually matter. Peace isn't something you announce and move on from. It is something you build carefully, maintain vigilantly, and protect constantly. It requires humility about what you done to know, respect for the people most affected, and commitment to long-term solutions rather than short-term victories. Trump has demonstrated none of these qualities. And until we demand them from our leaders, until we make dishonesty politically costly rather than politically advantageous, we're going to keep getting leaders who treat truth as optional and peace as a photo opportunity. So here is what I'm asking. Dante let these claims go unchallenged. When Trump says he ended 8 wars, ask which ones. Look up what actually happened. Share the facts with people who might not know. Support journalists doing this work. Call your representatives and demand they speak honestly about foreign policy. And maybe most importantly, Dante gets so exhausted by the constant lying that you start to accept it as normal. This isn't normal. This isn't how democracy is supposed to function. This isn't the standard we should accept. We deserve leaders who tell the truth. We deserve leaders who value peace over personal glory. We deserve leaders who understand that real achievement requires real work, not just real estate dealer tactics and branding exercises. I don't know if we're going to get those leaders, but I know we want to get them if we don't demand them. That's what I am seeing. That's what I believe. Maybe I'm wrong about some of the details. Maybe I'm being too harsh or not harsh enough, but I don't think I'm wrong about the fundamental reality here. Trump did not end 8 wars, and we shouldn't let him pretend he did. Let me tell you about one more thing that emerged from reading all these comments. There's this deep sense of exhaustion. People are tired. Tired of having to fact-check every statement, tired of watching obvious lies get treated as legitimate political positions, tired of feeling like they're shouting into the void while nothing changes. Someone wrote, "What on earth is it that he gets from blowing his own horn when the horn blowing is usually absolute nonsense, and he knows it is nonsense, and he knows that everyone else knows it is nonsense? What the hell is it that his sick personality gets from this?" And I think that actually a profound question. What does Trump get from this? Why persist in making claims that are so easily disproven? And I think the answer reveals something important about how we got here. Trump gets attention. He gets to dominate the news cycle. He gets to frame the conversation. Even when people are debunking his claims, they were still talking about him, still focusing on his narrative, still operating within the reality he has constructed. It's a kind of narcissistic genius, if we were being honest. By making outrageous claims constantly, by lying so prolifically that fact-checkers can keep up, by refusing to ever admit error or show shame, he has created a situation where the sheer volume of dishonesty becomes its own shield. People get exhausted trying to debunk everything. Media outlets struggle to decide which lies are worth covering. Fact checks get lost in the endless stream of new false claims, and eventually some people just throw up their hands and decide that truth doesn't matter anymore, that everyone lies equally, that there's no point in trying to sort fact from fiction. That's the goal, not to make people believe the lies, though some will, but to make enough people exhausted and cynical that they stop caring about truth at all. And here's where I think we are right now. We are in this dangerous moment where the institutions that are supposed to protect truth and accountability are failing. Congress won to impeach him despite overwhelming evidence of unfitness. Most media outlets treat his claims as just another political position rather than challenges to objective reality. His own party's representatives either actively support the lies or stay silent out of fear or political calculation. Multiple commenters pointed out that we are in the early stages of a dystopian reality. References to George Orwell's 1984 to the film V for Vendetta. And while I think we need to be careful about apocalyptic language, I also think those comparisons aren't entirely wrong. When a leader can claim he ended 8 wars that he didn't end, when he can nominate himself for a peace prize based on achievements that don't exist, when he faces no meaningful consequences for any of this, we're rewatching the active destruction of shared reality. And the scariest part? It's not just Trump. He's shown other authoritarians and would-be authoritarians around the world that this works, that you can lie constantly, that you can contradict yourself daily, that you can ignore all norms and institutions and not only survive but thrive politically. The damage extends far beyond Trump's term in office. He's creating a template that others will follow. He's normalizing a level of dishonesty that will make it harder for any future leader to govern based on truth. I want to end with something I genuinely believe, even though it might sound naive to some. I think this approach can last forever. I think systems built on lies eventually collapse under their own weight. I think reality has a way of asserting itself no matter how hard people try to deny it. When Trump's temporary ceasefires fall apart, when the conflicts he claimed to end resume, when his predictions fail and his promises prove empty, reality will intrude. The question is how much damage gets done before that happens, and whether we'll have the strength to rebuild what's been broken. And that's where we come in. Every person who refuses to accept the lies, every journalist who keeps fact-checking even when it feels futile, every citizen who demands accountability even when it seems hopeless, all of us are contributing to the eventual reassertion of truth. It's not dramatic. It's not immediate. It won't make for good television or viral moments, but it matters. Building shared reality, maintaining institutions of truth, holding leaders accountable, this is the unglamorous work of preserving democracy. I read a comment that said, historians, theologians, and mental health practitioners are sounding the alarm and we should all be concerned. And that's absolutely right. When experts across multiple disciplines are all saying the same thing, when they all warning about the same dangers, we need to listen. But listening isn't enough. We have to act, and action doesn't always mean dramatic resistance. Sometimes it means the simple act of refusing to let lies become normalized, of insisting on facts even when it's exhausting, of maintaining standards even when it feels like you are the only one who cares. Trump didn't end 8 wars. He wants us to believe he did. He'll keep claiming it. His supporters will keep repeating it. Some media outlets will keep treating it as a legitimate position worthy of debate rather than a false claim worthy of immediate correction. But we don't have to accept it. We can know the truth. We can share the truth. We can demand that our leaders and our media treat truth as something that actually matters. That is the only way through this. Not by matching Trump's dishonesty with our own, not by becoming cynical and giving up on the possibility of shared reality, but by stubbornly, persistently, exhaustingly insisting that reality matters, that facts exist, that words have meaning, that peace is more than a press release. Trump did not end 8 wars. That's the truth. And the truth still matters even